I mean, the one thing that I was super happy about was in the whole process, I made a statement that I did not want to come to Scott and make Orvis rods. Like, what fun is that? No one wins.
Mhm.
You know, you take two great companies and you merge them and converge them into one product type. There's no differentiation. That's boring.
That kind of leads me into like a
You know?
follow-up question. You said nothing's broken at Scott.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Scott is a legacy brand, been around since basically the dawn of graphite rods.
Yeah.
I mean, just celebrated the 50th anniversary,
Correct.
I think, pretty recently.
Yeah.
You know, and everything they come out with is successful. And Jim Barie is an amazing rod designer.
Yeah.
And everything they do is gold, and they have tons of fans. So why do they need you?
Well,
Is Jim looking to go fishing more? Or?
maybe that's where he is today.
Loop to Loop is supported by Patagonia, high-performance outerwear made responsibly for our planet. G. Loomis, American-made fly rods manufactured in Woodland, Washington. Cigars International, free shipping on the world's finest cigars. Able Reels, proudly designed, machined, anodized, and assembled in the USA, crafted for chaos. Renzetti, the vice of legends. Airflow, next-gen PVC-free fly lines with new tech, new formulas, and the same obsession. Trout Routes, a fly fishing navigation app that helps you stop guessing and start catching. Hi, I'm Ross Brunell, editor and publisher of Fly Fisherman magazine. Welcome to Loop, where we make deeper connections with the people behind the magazine. Today, we are the guests of Shawn Combs, the vice president of Scott Fly Rods. We're the guests because we are here in the factory, Scott Fly Rods factory in Montrose, Colorado. Shawn, thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming, Ross. This is awesome. It's only been about 3 months, 90 days. And to have you come in is great. It's good to sit down and catch this topic while it's fresh.
Good to be here. It was glorious stepping off the plane to 80-degree weather.
Yes.
After what we suffered through. First off, I want to tell you, I don't know, I'm kind of upset about something.
Okay.
I mean, you've been telling me for a couple of years, quite a few years, about your secret carp spot on the Hudson River.
It's still there.
Now it seems like you're never going to
No. It's still there.
I never will get to carp nirvana.
It's still there, and we'll make it happen. We both travel to fish.
Uh-huh.
And I have plenty of good reason to go visit the Northeast, primarily that fishery.
Really?
Yeah.
It's that good? You
it's
would
that
like
good.
Leave Colorado and go carp fishing?
I've caught carp multiple countries, multiple states domestically, Beaver Islands, LA River, Montana, Colorado, like you name it. Carp growing up as a kid. And I will say, and you know, it's tough. You get on, get the cameras, get the recording going, and you're like, Shawn, tell me about your favorite place to catch carp. It's like, this is being recorded.
Yeah, we're not spot burning. I mean, the Hudson River is quite a large body of water.
There's close to 300 miles of it that is tidal. And that's actually the coolest part. And anybody that's listening, if you live near the Hudson River, regardless of where, it is tremendous fishery that gets overlooked. And the coolest part about it is it has a tide swing that's influenced by the ocean's tide. It backs up and lets out up to 6-foot tide swings. And so you could be fishing for carp or bass or, stripers on migration, whatever, right? So let's say carp, and you are fishing it like you're in an ocean flat, where the mud flat that you're looking at is completely dry, will flood slowly over a 6-hour period. You get onto it, push it. The carp are coming on. They want on there just as much as you do. You're in skinny water, belly crawling carp that are,
Does the salt actually come all the way up, or the tide pushes the fresh water
tide slows
further
down
up?
the river, right? And
So the fresh
yeah,
water
so the
backs
river's
up.
going out, and then tide comes up, pushes it into the, call it the brackish estuary zone, and that will back up the river, and that tide influence is tidal all the way. It's just like the ocean's bigger. Even though the Hudson's big, the ocean's bigger, and it is literally displacing the river back upstream 3-4 hours upstream.
Oh, that's so cool. What's your favorite carp rod?
Oh, a 7-weight. Yeah.
Any particular model? See, I'm starting off with a trick question.
So trick question, and part of interviewing, it's a good one. So if you ask me this question, and I think that, look, I have a lot of favorite rods. Some of them start with O, some of them start with S. I had been fishing Scott rods since I was probably 16, 17 years old, and only fished Scott rods for the most part, only owned Scott rods until I got the job working at Orvis in 2011. And so, favorite carp rod from, call it early 2000s, favorite carp rod from that 15-ish year period from 2011 to last December. I really like on an Orvis flavor, the Helios 3 7-weight and the F series. I think that's a fantastic multi-purpose carp rod, just like a great one. But a little secret, and I think part of me interviewing this opportunity, leave a dream job to go to a dream job, I borrowed a buddy's sector and fished it all last season while I was working at Orvis. And, all my Orvis friends, I'm sorry. It feels like I was cheating on Orvis somehow or whatever, but I just really wanted to understand where the product was and do it without just being, casting in a parking lot or something like that. And so I fished the sector quite a bit and really agreed with it. I've been I've been blown away with that Scott difference, that Scott feel. It's unique, and I think that if it hits your casting stroke and the way you fish, it can really open up a lot of opportunities for an angler. And that's probably going into my favorite carp rod. And I think it's been here on the West Slope. It's a little bit warmer than normal for March, and the carp are starting to get into shallows in some of the local fisheries. And so
there's carp around here.
No, yeah, I wouldn't have taken the job otherwise. So it was like, this was the third question on the list, right?
I thought you were here for the skiing, and I do want to get into all of that. Obviously, you've been associated with Orvis for 10 or 15 years. Last 10 years in charge of all of their product development. But I do want to get into like your origin story. You said, prior to being at Orvis, you used Scott rods. But let's go like way back. Who got you into fly fishing? How did you start fly fishing, and how did you become a Scott fan?
Sure. So that's a pretty easy one. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. My parents owned and operated a specialty outdoor retailer. So think archery, deer, turkey, some fishing, predominantly fly fishing. But very much like you're going on your Western big game hunt. Here's a 3-weight fly rod to catch some trout in the stream near your camp, that sort of fly fishing. And my dad taught me how to cast fly rod. When I was 11, I got my first fly rod, which was Eagle Claw 3-weight, and I fished bass ponds with poppers for bluegill and bass. When I was old enough to drive, I went to the fly shop in town, Adventure Anglers. Back then it was part of Quest Outdoors. And a guy by the name of Dick Haas sold me a Scott SAS 9-foot 5-weight. And I remember coming back and, my dad was confused, right? Because, I'm like, I could have fly rods from the shop, but we sold SA rods and stuff like that. and I wanted a Scott rod, and that's what started it. And I sort of, you can see some of the posters that as a kid looking at the jet ski ad at the, you know, it's right over here. Exceptionally
The Harley
powerful,
the Harley Davidson
surprisingly
ad.
delicate. Yeah. You know, the Harley ad, stuff like that. I mean, that was it, just something about that, the culture of Scott. And then as I started using the product, and, you know, as a 16-year-old that, you know, cut his teeth on bass ponds with, you know, 5 lines and 6 lines, stuff like that. It was, that's what got me into going to seek out and try to catch a trout somewhere in Kentucky at a tailwater, you know, a put and take kind of place. And yeah, I was definitely, as a kid and a teenager and through college, like seasonally, I was mountain biking, skiing, or fly fishing, and that was my rotation. So that's what got me into fishing and how I got there. And I think that a lot of Scott customers will get this. Once you fish a Scott rod, it's really, there's a lot of brand loyalty there, and you know, people understand what is so special about the brand, and they typically tend to become Scott fanatics, you know, and they fish Scott rods, and I became that as a young kid, and it was cool when I got the job. I mean, you know, if you fast forward through that, there's a blur period of I went to school, got my master's in mechanical engineering, thought I was going to go work for a ski company, a bike company, or fishing company. I ended up working for ExxonMobil, moved to Houston, Texas. I thought, wow, this is interesting. You know, like, well, cool. I'll pay for college at least out of this. You know, and put some time in, and I learned a lot. But I ended up moving back to Kentucky, worked for a small engineering firm, and spent most of my 20s traveling the world, working on site and installation sites for vapor recovery units and gasoline loading terminals. So it's a fancy way of saying I made vapor vacuum cleaners to help keep the environment, you know, a little on the better side. That led to, geez, a career move that took me to the Northeast. I worked for Lockheed Martin at a DOE lab that was responsible for the U.S. Navy's submarine aircraft carrier nuclear propulsion, which is a long, like, if everybody's not asleep by now, you know, then there's your chance. But and then Ross, that led to, you know, all this time, the theme through all this is I still have those 3 seasons: mountain biking, snow skiing, fly fishing, repeat. And I was coming home in probably late 2010 or fall 2010. I was coming home from Utah. I've been fishing, and the guy next to me on the airplane on the flight coming into Albany, New York, was reading the Drake mag, and you know, and it's a new issue. I hadn't seen it. I was like, "Hey, can I check that out?" When you're done, he flips it to me. We land. I give it back to him. That individual was Steve Hempkins, who at the time was the divisional merchandise manager for fish and hunt at Orvis. Unbeknownst to me, when he asked for my email to maybe hook up and go fishing or ski or something like that, um, I gave it to him. And then 3 months later, I get an email and he said, "Hey, do you want to come over to Orvis and design fly rods and fishing reels, stuff like that?" I was like, "Yeah."
You said
I
yes.
said, "Yes."
It's finally spring, and that means it's the best time of year to go fishing, enjoy your own backyard, or smoke a cigar. The time to get outside is now before summer arrives and it gets too hot and sticky. We're proud to have Cigars International as a sponsor and supporter of Loop to Loop. They have the largest selection of premium handmade cigars, and there's no better time to smoke a cigar than when mayflies are hatching or tarpon are rolling. If this beautiful spring weather has caught you empty-handed, no problem. Cigars International gives you free shipping on every order. They make cigars easy, approachable, and fun with expert guides, staff reviews, and helpful advice. You can support this podcast and get 20% off your order by using the code FLYFISH at checkout, or just visit cigarsinternational.com/flyfish and you'll automatically get the discount. I
It's
think the first time I heard about you was from Steve, and he was like, "Man, we got this hot new guy from the aerospace
yeah,
industry,
yeah,
Lockheed
right,
Martin. He knows all about materials and stuff
right,
like
right.
that." And in that day and age, you were coming into, an industry where there was a lot of legendary rod designers.
Sure.
At that time, Jerry Seam was still at Sage or
Yep,
still looming large. Steve
yep.
Ray Jeff was at
Steve, yeah,
Loomis. There was all these
yeah.
big names, and you were like the youngest guy on the totem pole, but
It
then
wasn't even on the totem pole, buddy. I mean,
hadn't made it to the totem pole
yeah,
yet.
no, no. It's just
But then, it's crazy to see what happened over the next 12 or 14 years, because you definitely rose up to the top of the totem pole. You mentioned brand loyalty
hmm.
earlier,
Yep.
and consumers, I think, in fly fishing have a hard time. They very rarely switch brands. But what you did at Orvis, this is, my opinion and my observation, you got a lot of people to switch to Orvis,
Hmm. Well,
or at least the Helios rod series did, and you had a
yeah,
lot to do with
yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah. I think it's a
And you really grew their market share, or that rod line.
well, I mean, I can appreciate your viewpoint of that, but let me tell you, that was really Orvis and the team at Orvis was positioned for what was to come in such a fantastic way. And I think Helios, Helios Gen 1, Helios 2, and by the time we got to Helios 3, I feel like that it was really just a really nice calling card for the community to take a second look at Orvis and understand their stance on conservation. The fly fishing 101 courses and bringing people into the sport, the stewardship there. And I really think that it all starts with product, right? And great product solves problems, and people will acknowledge and see that. And I think that it was a perfect kind of Orvis, this great heritage company that had done so much, and sort of had maybe veered off the road a little bit, and then through some great product launches and some focus on product quality and innovation, that started to bring the eyeballs back around, and then people rediscovered Orvis. Some of them for the first time, some people, second or third time or whatever. So, um,
That's very humble of you that
I mean,
you spread the love around, but it is true. It all starts with product. And coincidentally, when you were in charge of
yeah,
product,
right,
Orvis was turning out some very good
yeah,
products on
yeah.
all levels.
Yeah. Well, it
So it was
takes
great.
it takes a village, and props to that whole team that made that possible.
So after a great career at Orvis, you've switched over to Scott Fly Rods, and a lot of people don't switch their,
Well,
consumers don't
brand
switch
loyalty,
brands,
right?
brand
Yeah,
loyalty. Yeah. And,
yeah,
in our business, people don't usually switch brands. So it was kind of a momentous occasion that a lot of people took interest in, obviously. Were you
yeah.
surprised at how many people
Oh,
found it fascinating and curious?
yeah, a little bit. I was a little shocked. I was like, "Not really?" But I mean, nevertheless, um, it was a really hard decision, but one that I'm super proud of. It wasn't easy to make, right? I mean,
I imagine it
you
was
know,
agonizing. Just
Orvis is, I mean, I can sit here and I know everybody's going to hear this as being very genuine, but Orvis is a great brand, great people, uh, and great product and everything. And leaving that was less about leaving Orvis and more about running to an opportunity. I think that people in their career path, they either run from a job or run to an opportunity. And, you know, Jim and myself have become, good friends over the years. And there was always like, hey, would you ever want to move to Colorado? I'm not trying to, just curious. And so there was all these like little bit of just moments, that were very instrumental in planting this seed. And I think that it really speaks to the brilliance of and patience and methodology that Bartschi kind of constructs his life with. He was just like, hey buddy, how you doing? And you get a lot of people like, hey, if you'd ever want to do something. It wasn't that. It was just like just genuinely friends. And I think he knew the connection that I had with Scott. And it got to the point where, one day I was sitting there talking to my wife and I'm like, hey, we've talked about in the late, like 2019, pre-COVID, like, what would it be like if we moved out west? We have two young daughters and they love skiing. We love doing stuff outdoors or whatever. And it was always like, and we toured around. She and I got married in Jackson, in Moose, Wyoming on the Snake. And so we had toured around a lot of different spots and she kept coming back to like, Colorado's probably in like Southwest Colorado, like that's probably, and then it started all kind of lining up. And about the time whenever I looked at my daughters and said, would you guys like to ski Telluride as your home mountain? They were like, yeah, like whatever. And
They weren't like, we don't want to leave our friends. How old
well,
are they?
no, there's a lot of that too. They're 10 and 12. And yeah, there is a lot of, we don't want to lose our friends and leave our friends and stuff like that. But
Harder in high school. 12 is not too bad.
yeah. Yeah. That was, so it was consideration, the timing of that and everything else, and it's a perfect opportunity. I mean, it really is a dream job.
Hell yeah, it is.
100%. And one that I'm really passionate and sincere about. And, and it has less to do with, it has is just as much to the location and the brand and the team and being able to work with, the Scott family here. It's just, there's a lot of this serendipitous in some way.
Today's episode is supported by Just Add H2O, the go-to name in synthetic fly tying materials. From fibers such as Steve Farrar Blend and Flash and Slinky to a wide array of tying brushes, Just Add H2O offers exceptional durability, unmatched color selection, and performance only synthetics can offer. These materials hold up and fish well in any water, from the flats to the Bolivian jungle and every trout stream in between. Look for Just Add H2O at your local fly shop or at renzetti.com. You've only been here 3 months.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
You took the job as vice president, but you've only been here 3 months. What's it been like so far? Like, are you sort of just like learning the ropes and checking out how they do things currently?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you come storming in here with a brand new game plan? Like,
so how does
it work?
That, Ross, is a great question. That's the beauty about Scott Fly Rods is there's really nothing broken here, right? So this wasn't a hire of, a lot of times whether you watch the news, watch TV, sitcoms, whatever, these like hires are strategic to come transform, change management, et cetera, like all the things that you would put on your LinkedIn profile, right?
Mm-hmm.
None of that applies here. This was more about taking the opportunity to come in, support the brand, understand who Scott Fly Rods is, and support that. Sure, there'll be opportunity for Jim and myself to, design new processes or new fly rods or something like that. But it wasn't a, hey, we're hiring a change agent. And then from my standpoint, this is more of, um, being part of the support team that comes in and says, there's this great brand making great products, handcrafted and handmade in Colorado. And we're not looking to disturb that. We're looking just to support it and carry it forward for the next 50 years. And so that put me in a pretty comfortable place because and the same thing at Orvis. I don't like to just come in and just for the sake of it, just change something just because, it's like, oh, I know you could do that better, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Super disruptive. Very rarely does it work. And I think it's better to absorb, to be a sponge, to really understand the culture, the processing techniques, some of the brilliant design strategies that have been in place at Scott for, since Harry's time in the 70s, and just take those and embrace them. And then through that process of collaborating with Jim and with Teresa, it's like, yeah, what if we did this or what if we did that? I mean, the one thing that I was super happy about was in the whole process, I made a statement that I did not want to come to Scott and make Orvis rods. Like, what fun is that? No one wins.
Mhm.
You take two great companies and you merge them and converge them into one product type. There's no differentiation. That's boring.
That kind of leads me into like a
You know?
follow-up question. You said nothing's broken at Scott. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Scott is a legacy brand, been
Sure.
around since basically the dawn of, the dawn of
The
graphite
graphite, yeah.
rods. I
Yeah.
mean, just celebrated the 50th anniversary, I
Correct.
think, pretty recently.
Yeah.
Uh, and everything they come out with is successful. And Jim Bartschi is an amazing rod designer.
Yeah.
And everything they do is gold, and they have tons of fans. So why do they need you?
Well,
Is Jim looking to go fishing more, or?
maybe that's where he is today. I don't know, but no, I think that there's a couple components to that. One, the track of innovation at Scott is real. Like those, you can't just come out with new rods that are same, but they're actually not the same. There's an evolution from the G series to G2 to GS to GTs that just came out, and you can cast those rods. And while I have some really favorite old school San Francisco Gs that I still love fishing, I built a GT as part of my onboarding, to walk through the floor and build a rod. And I love that rod. It's a fantastic rod, and I think so there's part of that is to keep that trajectory going, the longevity of the brand, and maybe Jim wants to fish more or whatever. I mean, that's there's all part of that. And then part of it also is to expand upon the current capabilities in a way that in due time will be right and will be somewhat conservative, but it'll happen, in its due time. So it's not like a come in and what's the new saltwater series? How fast could we, come up with something? And
Mhm.
Jim and myself, I mean, Jim's a brilliant rod designer and always admired his work and as many people do. So having that was another in the pros column of do I come here or not? That was another one. It's just like, in my field, very rarely do you get a chance to work side by side with someone who you admire that, has been honing their craft for twice as long as you even thought about honing
Mhm.
your craft. You know how the curve works there, right? It's like the hours in the boat, you never really master it, but you start to kind of build that experience, and his arc of experience is a lot more than mine. So having that sort of mentor, if you will, has been pretty awesome as well.
The opportunity for collaboration is unheard of. Like I can't remember when this has ever happened before, where you have like two master rod designers working side by side together. I mean, usually one person leaves and then a young guy comes in and, you know,
Yeah.
sort of learns by himself, really. There's
Well,
not been a lot of overlapping
I,
like
I
this.
think kudos to Scott Fly Rods as they wanted this transition to not be the previous rod designer leaves and a young guy comes in and tries to put it all together, but to really protect and to nurture what Scott is and what the Scott difference is, to have a number of years where Jim and I are collaborating. I'm learning from him. He may be learning from me, but it's just we're collaborating, true collaborative, like fun. I mean,
Mhm.
that's what it amounts to is having fun, making good product, kind of keeping that innovation curve moving, and having that overlap is something that I think is really good for the company and doesn't happen that often, right? It's
Yeah.
usually
Like
you
never
think
in
about a
this
plan.
business. Yeah.
Yeah, you think about a plan well down the road after, and you look around and one day you go, oh, well, who should we get to come do that? So
Sort of seems like Scott is looking down the road to preserve their brand and the
correct.
knowledge,
Yeah.
keep the brand. Like there's like a lot of intellectual
Yeah.
property that's unique to the brand, and they're obviously want to put it into somebody and keep things going. I think
Keep
it's
it
smart.
going. I think it's really smart, and that's why I'm here.
Hmm.
Because that mission is pretty clear. And you think about, whether it's Harry Wilson, Larry Kenny early on, Larry Kenny, Jim Bartschi, and just kind of you can see where that goes from there. It's
Real
pretty cool.
seamless passing of the torch, so to speak.
Yeah.
At Orvis, you were involved in making packs and waders and every other little nets, I assume, and everything
Yeah.
else. This is just rods. Are you going to miss that other part of your job, or is Scott going to start making waders?
Oh, I can assure you now, if everybody just stops listening here, we all know that Scott's not going to make waiters. So that it's a really good question, Ross. I will say this, that at first it was a fear, I think, like in the back of my head, oh man, I love designing reels, Ratio just launched and I literally was on the other side of the screen going, oh,
Goodbye, baby.
that was my baby. But I will say the upside of focusing on one product for one customer, just especially retail wholesale, is so like it just clears everything where you're like, I'm gonna go to work and I'm gonna make, whether it's the real seat component or a new shape of cork or new, working with a new material in a graphite resin package or something like whatever it is, new profile strategies. It is supporting one product, and I think that's pretty awesome. It's the focus there is something that's been pretty empowering for me. And, before any given day I was working with a team on, uh, one of 3,564 SKUs, not including flies,
Wow. Yeah.
just you're all over the place. And I really enjoyed that because the freshness of, we were talking about the tippet whippet, tippet holder on the packs at Orvis and how that was fun as a solve that I worked with Jesse Haller on, or supporting Natalie and Jesse on wading footwear and waders and Simon Chu. Like those were all fun moments and, very challenging in their own right. But it's at some point, it's just like, it's great just to take that focus and bring it in and just say like, no, I want to spend some time just really like making perfect fly rods.
In the evolution of like fly rod design, in my mind, Scott's got to be working on something new all the time. Like, every fly rod company is working on a new saltwater rod or a new freshwater rod or something. You always got to have something in the hopper.
Mm-hmm.
Did you walk in mid-project on anything or at the beginning or?
No, the beauty of the timing is Jim had just brought, and Scott, they just brought GT to market. And, and Scott, if you look at the historical perspective of Scott, there's not a tendency to change just for the sake of changing. They will change out a series, Radian to Centric, whenever there's a technology, whenever there's an opportunity, or there's something that really will benefit the customer and it's better, right? So it's all in mind of the customer, and that's what's great about it. I mean, I run to a ton of Scott loyalists, or Scott, anglers, and they tell me about their Radian, they love the 9'5", and it's such a great rod, and I think that's amazing because whenever Scott built that rod, they built it as a lifetime tool, and when it holds up the test of time over and again, I think that's amazing and just it's great. So it's something that any product designer should want to strive for. Is not just like the really great thing for your next trip, but it's the really great thing for the rest of your life, and you're just going to build upon it and use it. When I first moved to Colorado in January, I flew to Lower Gunnison, and there were fish up on midges. And in my skiff, I brought a dry fly rod, and my dry fly rod was a San Francisco era 9 foot 4 weight G 2-piece rod, and I put it together and caught a couple fish on dry flies in January. And I turned and I started to disassemble it. And my buddy looked at me. He's like, "What rod is that?" It's like 2-piece. "Oh, it's my old Scott G904. It's a really cool rod. Do you want to throw it?" And he goes like, "No, that thing's older than I am. Let's put that thing back away." And I'm like, "No, it's a fishing tool." And, and it laces fish just like it did, 30 years ago. And I think that's something that's really remarkable about Scott is, it's not just a change for the sake of change and churn and burn and what's new. And so taking a deep breath, and there's a lot of pressure, coming from some of our friends and family in the community of like, "What are you guys going to do? I can't wait to see this. What's the whiteboard look like? Oh my gosh, is it going to be a sector replacement? Is it going to be a centric replacement? I mean, you wouldn't do a GT because, it's just like, calm down, everybody. These things take time. And
a lot of
to get it right.
A lot of that, like people get it in their heads. Oh, when LeBron changes teams, he's got to win that championship the very next season. It's not like that in fly fishing.
No, it's not.
You mentioned the word technology, and I want to ask a couple of questions that are just like I think consumers want to know.
Sure.
Do different rod companies actually have different technology that only they have? Not even talking about Scott or Orvis, but
so the short answer is yes. However, sometimes it doesn't come to the ingredients. It's the use of the ingredients, the processing techniques, construction techniques that become the differentiators. So, sometimes I speak in analogies too much, but carbon fiber has been around for 50 years plus for the defense industry, whatnot. And it's fundamentally, you have different modules material, standard, intermediate, low, high. You have maybe 3 or 4 major brands that produce carbon fiber strands that then prepreggers, either those brands or some other prepregger, will take and put in a resin package to their specification, the fiber air weight and all that geekery stuff. So, but the ingredients are pretty much, for the most part, there's not a lot of proprietary ingredients there. There's some, but it's not
you
as
buy the pre-preg carbon fiber from certain vendors. I mean, they'll sell to anyone, won't they?
I told somebody this morning, well, some of them, yes, but it's really, there's no fly fishing company that's going to go to a pre-pregger and say, "I would like to have 101 GSM material with 28% resin content built on this T700 fiber from Torre with, a sprinkled dust of some nano unicorn horn." They're going to look at you and say, "Let me check. Boeing doesn't use that. Therefore, we will not run that in these massive facilities." And my joke is like, the next time you're on an airplane, look out. There's more carbon in the wing of that plane than there is in like all of the fly rods that were made last year in the industry. It's like, so we're they call it industrial, but sporting goods, fly fishing, hockey sticks, tennis rackets, etc., snow skis, carbon mountain bikes, that part of the industry is about 2% of the carbon manufacturing industry that supports aerospace, defense, etc. And so that 2% is not going to go in and wag the dog.
No, you're basically getting sporting equipment's basically getting what's left over.
Right. And there's some really good leftovers.
Yeah.
So that's the differentiating. The difference comes into how you use those materials, how you apply them, and the construction techniques that really creates a Sage feels like this, an Orvis feels like that, Scott feels like this, and those all come back to design philosophies as well. I mean, I think that's something that it took me a minute to understand 15 years ago. And then once I got kind of comfortable with that, I was like, oh, okay, so I'm not going to call up and cook up a secret batch of cookies with never seen before flour and butter and milk, you know. But instead, I'm, proportion it out and maybe select the best chocolate chips and make the best cookies that way.
You earlier you mentioned Jim Bartschi's friendship, and one of the things I think is cool about the fly fishing industry is a lot of times, like when we're at shows and stuff out at the casting pond, I
Mm-hmm.
see the rod designer guys from different brands just chilling and hanging out and
Yeah.
trying each other's rods
Yeah.
and talking. It's super cool.
It's how it
I
should.
mean, there's
It's how
not
it
like
should be. I mean, we literally, no one's winning a championship ring here. There's no race to the top. When you pull it way back, we're all making fly rods, a unique expression of a design philosophy to go out and spend time outdoors, and to fall in love with the fisheries and then, spend more time outdoors. And so pick your flavor. Um, I think that there's over my time in the industry, there's been times where it's up and down and, and it's like this company's evil, that company does this
yeah.
and all
It's
that.
a
And
like
I'm
even
just like,
consumers sometimes, even
really?
consumers, they're like, "Oh, it's got fly rods," or they get all like jazzed up, and it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
man,
yeah,
the
yeah.
people at these companies don't even act like that. Why are you
Well,
acting like that? I mean,
they're passionate. I mean, that's the don't tell a Giants fan that the Steelers, are better or what, what I'm saying.
yeah.
That's just how it goes. But when
But to that analogy, when the players meet each other afterwards, just like,
they're
hey,
high
man,
fiving
yeah,
and
you're
hugging and
playing,
good
you're
game.
just another player. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I actually do love the coming into it with the Barchies and the Seams and the Ray Jeffs, Howard, Hardy, like coming into that point in the industry with, I would say, all these legacy, really brilliant rod designers and seeing their product and and having that it was really good for me because it wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to make a fly rod over here for Orvis and participate in that team and I'll get a participation trophy. I mean, I'm not a competitive guy of like, I'll race to the end of the hallway, but I'm internally really competitive with, making good product for the community and the anglers and stuff like that. So it would have been a lot different if, it was like fly fishing was like rollerblades, what color do you make them?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
little more to it than that.
yeah, there is. Yeah. Yeah.
You have a break between jobs? Did you get a month or two off
No,
or no?
I think I took 2 weeks around the holidays. I can't remember exactly, but I think my last day was December 18th, and my first day here was January 5th or something like that.
Have you been here long enough that you have secret spots here now
Well,
or
they're not my secret spots, but
yeah.
I mean, I actually I told Jim, I was like, hey, I don't want to be weird about this, but I don't want you to tell me where to go fishing. I don't necessarily want to go fishing with you. Let me just have that childhood moment of exploration. And I'm just going to go out and, sort of like pick a different place on a map, go fish there. I'd fished some of this area before over the years, but, town water, I've been, after work, get
Hmm.
out of work and I'll fish a stretch. And it's been really fun. I mean, it feels like it's been a year. It's only been 3 months, but with the unseasonable weather, I've been out, fishing just about every afternoon.
It
And
was it was kind of a dry winter. Was your first ski season here kind of a disappointment or
yeah, a
was it
little bit.
okay?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like what happened with the snow?
I don't know. I'm a little worried about it. I have a friend that lives down in Durango, skis the pass a lot, and he's like, "Hey, man, these guys fingers crossed that like we're gonna catch up on snowpack in April." And he's like, "Last year April was great. And it's gonna happen again." And because I'm fearful that I've been fishing dry flies since I got here in January. Midges into olives and betas and I'm a little worried that the hoppers and whatnot won't have any water to float down on. They'll be hopping on rocks. So we'll see.
Need some
It's a re-
rain or
it's a
something.
real thing. Yeah.
Do you have any big trips planned? Fishing
Mm,
trips, or you just have all
no,
work planned?
I've got a family to relocate. So they've been doing a little bit of that. They've been out here. We all went skiing Telluride, and they're finishing school up and doing the transition. And I've kind of been,
Oh, they
yeah,
didn't move yet.
not yet. No,
Okay,
no.
they're finishing their school year.
Yeah, yeah. So we're just working out all I call it doing adult things, and being responsible parents and not
Mm,
ripping kids out after Christmas and being like, here's a new place, stuff
yeah.
like that. So
Oh, that's great. I kind of thought that maybe during the Christmas break you just
nah, it was a
uprooted
lot. It was a
everything.
lot. Yeah, it's like packing the house up while their Christmas tree's lit, and like, nah, let's let them have a little bit more stability and get them out in the summer.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are you willing to give us a little tour of the Scott
Oh yeah,
Fly Rod
yeah, yeah,
Factory?
yeah. It's everybody's gone home, but I'll use your my vivid descriptions and your imagination. I'm sure we can put one together.
That'd be good. We'll
Yeah,
shoot some pictures. Thank you very
yeah.
much, man.
Thanks
It
for
was great
coming.
to. I love your honesty, and it was
Ah,
great to just like sit down and I know it's a kind of a sensitive subject for. It's a hard moment in anyone's life when they just change their job, you know? It's a big
yeah,
moment
yeah,
in anyone's
yeah.
life, and you were sort of under a magnifying glass. So
Well,
you
I know.
handled it well for everyone. I know you have like tons of really good friends at Orvis and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
but congratulations, and I'm sure they all said congratulations too.
They did.
You got to
It's
do what's good for you and your family
yeah,
in the
yeah.
end, right?
Everybody's
Sure.
been really supportive. I mean, even including Simon, who's a good friend. It's just it's people get it, they understand. So again, anytime that you can run to an opportunity and not away from a job, and it makes the decision harder, but it's usually more meaningful.